We talked a lot about the trans agenda, and I know you know a lot about the trans agenda. Specifically, transportation is what we talked about there. If there's another trans agenda, I'm not sure what that's about.
We're clear to engage. Time on target. 5 mics. Out.
Welcome back to Crosstabs with Brian Iverson and Reagan Knope. We are the Batman and Robin of Oregon Republican politics. I'll leave you to decide who's Batman, who's Robin.
Oh, that's
Brian, how are you
clear.
today?
That's clear, Reagan, who's Batman and Robin in this scenario.
I am your young ward.
And you are no, it's clear to me you're Batman and I'm Robin.
I was gonna say I didn't necessarily think it's up for debate. I sort of look at you as Batman. You're the grizzled veteran who's been crime fighting out there for years, and I'm here now just to learn. But I appreciate you saying that I'm Batman. That's great.
Yeah, I think it was more like Wolverine, Deadpool. We're kind of both our thing, and maybe you're more Deadpool and I'm more Wolverine because you're kind of a jokester and you like to laugh and have some fun. You don't drop as many F-bombs as me. Like
you did. I did see Deadpool and Wolverine over the weekend, and it was good. It wasn't like the best Marvel movie ever, but it was funny and but it's sort of it's uncomfortable territory for Marvel because they don't usually have R-rated movies, and this one was definitely R-rated, but kind of cartoonish violence. But speaking of uncomfortable situations, I'm here not in my office. Listeners won't be able to see that, obviously, but I'm working in my wife's office as we're doing some rearranging. I'm going to sell my 1500 Ram 1500 pickup, and I bought a 2500 GMC Sierra, so I can tow if I need to tow stuff. I don't have anything to tow yet, but that's in the plans there. So we're making, you got to make some moves sometimes, Brian, and get some things done.
Well, I'm glad that you finally bought a real pickup truck.
Yep. Everybody has been telling me that. Everybody
get into the 3/4 ton. I mean, a half ton just doesn't make you a man, Reagan. I don't know. People, they buy a little F-150 or in your case, a 1500 Dodge or something and think they have a truck. I'm like, well, we tend to call those pizza trucks. I mean, they're great for making deliveries, but
it was a diesel, Brian, but it was an eco diesel. So I feel like that, takes away a little bit of the diesel credibility there. So.
It's tough. Eco diesel is almost like an oxymoron.
It's like the Prius of trucks is what you're telling me.
Yeah, I think heck, my Super Duty, we have a couple of Super Duties, and I do have an F-150, but we call that my town car because nothing else fits in the parking garages or anything. Vicky's got a bigger truck. Well, no, I got an F-350. Hers is a 250, but hers is taller than mine. But I might have to jack mine up now a couple inches just to make sure that my truck's bigger than hers.
Well, what else is uncomfortable, Brian, is this conversation about transportation. And I wouldn't say it's uncomfortable for, it will be uncomfortable for the legislature, but it's also really uncomfortable for taxpayers, I think, because Oregon, you put this in the notes. Oregon transportation leaders say they may cut 1,000 jobs if the legislature doesn't approve more money. And of course, we know that in the legislature, you can never take money that's already going to something in the general fund and move it to a priority. You always have to add new revenue, or at least that's what they try to do. Is they're always trying to add new revenue to solve new problems instead of deprioritizing things we don't care about, defunding them and moving the money. But I'm so frustrated by this whole transportation discussion, as I know a lot of the people on this joint transportation committee have been, and all the people involved. But take us through a little bit of this on transportation. What's like the current state of play?
Well, I think the current state of play is this incredible PR campaign by ODOT and the commission to basically strong arm the Oregonian taxpayer over the course of these public transportation meetings, these drip of stories that they're clearly pushing out there from I'm sure they're probably paying a PR firm 20,000 a month to do this plan, because really the idea is to go out there, tell everybody the grid is horrible, it won't get any better, and here's a grim outlook unless your legislature acts and gives us money, basically. And then that's going to force the legislature into a strategy that they're going to have to come up with additional funding, or else you're going to have, the roads over the pass not plowed again, and the new one, 1,000 jobs are going to be cut. You know what I say on it? Cut the dang 1,000 jobs. I guarantee we can do without 1,000 more state workers doing nothing but standing there holding a slow stop sign for $72 an hour. Cut them. That's what I would say if I was the legislature. Cut them, because you know what? You don't just get more every time you whine and complain. And my other thing that I would tell ODOT, and I really want to ask Reagan on this one, who's in control of ODOT? Is it the governor's office? Why is the commission outrunning roughshod on this? And why isn't the governor's office talking about transportation? I don't see them anywhere around this process. They're kind of hiding behind the commission saying, oh, we're going to wait to see their budget. Well, I guarantee what their budget is a heck of a lot more than it is now. And they're just coming up with, you got to fund us, fund us, fund us. Otherwise, we're cutting services. And I just kind of think that's a bunch of crap. And the worst part about it, Reagan, I see it as they so try to pit the urban rural divide in this article, and also the tone coming out of there. And it's basically like, well, what we're going to do is we're going to cut all of rural Oregon first, and then we'll worry about the other stuff. But we know you're getting it first. And that's their way of basically telling Republican legislators, you better freaking give us money or you're not going to get crap. And I think that's where our rural legislators got to call bullshit on this, and this agency and this commission headed up by Lee Byer. He knows he's a former senator. He knows the game. And I think he knows how it's being played. And they did this last winter. If everybody remembers, need $18 million. Otherwise we're not plowing roads. And I think most of us over on the east side of the state could probably do without going to the west side of the state. So in my mind, I'm like, you know what? Don't see what happens. Like, don't give them the money.
Yeah, I mean, I was there for that. That was a conversation that happened after the long session, I think. And basically what ODOT was like, we want a guarantee from all the legislative leadership to support $20 million or something like that, 19 million in the short session to pay the overtime to plow their roads and materials and stuff like that. And what I don't think legislative leaders had insight into really at that time was how bad the ODOT problem was going to be. And I think ODOT saw an opportunity to patch a hole in their budget and move them along another 6 months to a year by taking 20 million from the legislature. So they took it. And I think that ultimately this is a failure of leadership. I can remember in the 2013 and 2015 sessions, Senator Cano was not serving on transportation, but I would just hear that ODOT was a mess, that they were wasting taxpayer money, that they were really struggling as an agency. They were not well run. There were a lot of problems there. And I think, and this is just my own opinion, and I don't necessarily have like all the facts I couldn't hand you a 1-page paper that says this is why, but my assumption is if we got into it, that ODOT has been so poorly run for so long that now that they're coming to the legislature and basically saying the gas tax is not going to cover our transportation needs, for the next 10 years, because we kind of do this every 5 to 7 years. We do a transportation package that covers the next 10 years or so. The last one was 2017. It included a gas tax increase, largest tax increase in Oregon history, and a bunch of projects and maintenance in that. One, they haven't even finished all the projects from the 2017 package, including Rose Quarter, which is like an interchange, I guess, up in Portland, right by Rose Garden, stuff like that. And we looked at and tried to do Columbia River Crossing now as the I-5 bridge replacement project, and that barely moved forward. In fact, probably took some steps backwards, right? So there is this that we've been basically stuck for a decade on transportation, not moving forward. And now, because they no longer have the funds to be able to waste money, they're just going to threaten us. But here's the thing too, you know this, whenever a government is low on dollars, it's never the things they don't cut first. They don't cut middle management. They don't cut admin. They don't cut HR. They don't cut DEI. They always cut frontline people. Oh, police and fire. Oh, we got to cut, in Oregon's budget, it's teachers, it's state police, it's people who are keeping the prisons open. Those are the people they cut first. And you were exactly right. You said they're going to cut rural transportation first. They will ensure that everything in Portland runs smoothly, that everything in Eugene runs smoothly. And but it'll start to get bad in Pendleton and Medford and Redmond and all over the state where they're not 100% bought in on the leftist agenda. So now one of the real problems. So let's take all that aside. We'll say ODOT's a very poorly run agency. There's some significant changes that need to happen there.
I'll stipulate on that point.
Okay, great. Right. I know. You're a hard sell on that. We do have one real problem, which is the gas tax. They said, I think in 2027 or 2026, that's going to be peak gas tax revenue. That after that, fuel efficient vehicles and EV sales will be to the point where gas tax revenues will begin to go down. Okay, they're not going down yet, but they project they will go down in the next 2 years. Now, is this like the world's going to end in the next 2 years climate change type of prediction, which never turns out to be true? I don't know. I'm not enough of an expert, but let's say that in 2 years, gas tax revenue starts to trail off. We do need to find a way to fill that gap on funding or reduce what we're spending, right? That's a real problem. That does need to be solved. The Transportation Commission is interesting to me. You mentioned Lee Beyer, who's sort of ends up being the spokesperson for them. He's actually the vice chair. The chair is a woman I have not met, but her name is Julie Brown. She's the general manager for the Rogue Valley Transportation District for 16 years. So, the buses in Medford and Ashland, basically. So I think the commission and the governor sort of work hand in hand here. The commission really, we have this with the EQC, the Environmental Quality Commission that runs the Department of Environmental Quality, where they sort of set up this commission, and the idea is you're going to have these people from all over the state with different viewpoints that help manage this big aspect of government instead of just the governor and her agency director. I would say the idea is good, but in execution, it does not seem to really improve outcomes very much.
No,
you have agencies that
got the Ag Commission, you got ODF and W Commission. They've done nothing but be another spot to go land former representatives and senators with jobs and in a way to be relevant in a specific industry. And then it gives them cover. It gives the governor cover in regards to, oh, well, that's the commission. Oh, well, and I think the governor's done her best job when it comes to these agencies, but this is another one of those, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but I can't help myself on these commissions, which drives me crazy. I put in for the Ag Commission, Reagan, like 4 times over the last, 5 years or so. And I've never even gotten a response, so they don't want somebody with a deferring opinion. They want somebody with their opinion on these commissions.
Right. That's
So
that's
they
the
do
problem.
work. They coordinate.
The,
There's no doubt in my mind that there's not coordination happening.
well, you're the governor, and so you get to reward your friends with these positions, right? And so what happens is if the governor, since we've had 40 plus years of Democratic control, Democrats have generally rewarded environmental activists over more moderate or even conservative interests, except for as to prove that they're bipartisan. They're like, oh, we'll appoint a Republican, but the majority will always be liberal Democrats, right? They never allow any type of true balance on these commissions. And I think that's a real problem.
Yep.
You need somebody, and this is the thing, what I don't quite understand is Democrats never seem to want to take advantage of Republicans and what we do best. Like you mentioned, let's cut the head count, right? Why doesn't the legislature make Ways and Means a bipartisan committee, a truly bipartisan committee, so that Republicans can force some cuts through? Because you know what's going to happen, Brian? They're just going to blame us for the cuts anyway. So why, if I'm a Democrat, I'm like, great, I get to pass a budget that balances. We'll have more revenue for the stuff we want to do because it's not getting wasted because the Republicans are cutting the waste, and we're going to blame them for cutting the stuff we like. What's not to love about that, Brian? I think I've just new hack. The majority leaders, the president, the speaker, please hire me to help you take advantage of Republicans and also let us cut the budget at the same time. Help us help you, and that would be smart. But they never seem to take advantage of that, really. They want to control, the agenda for the most part. But that means that you own all the failures. That's the thing is, none of these failures, they try to blame them on the Republican majorities in the 90s. I'm like, the 90s, I'm starting to feel it, Brian. The 90s were a long time ago, and they've been in control for most of the last 2 decades. So all these problems are owned by them. The transportation failures are owned by them, and they don't want to, what they don't want to do is they don't want to punish EV buyers because they want to try to make it so they can they're subsidizing EVs. They're literally creating this problem. Gas tax revenues would be in better shape if we didn't subsidize electric vehicle purchases. But they're continuing to push the policy that causes this problem. They don't want Representative Shelley Bossler Davis, my neighbor, at one of the meetings in Portland. She just threw out there, charging tolls to bikes that go on the I-5 bridge. I thought that was awesome. Everybody freaked out when she said that. I was like, well, why not? The bikes are using it. Maybe they don't pay the same toll as the car, but the bikes are using it too. They just expect that we're going to build all this expensive infrastructure for bikes and walking, and then we're not going to charge bikers and walkers. It's unreasonable. They have unreasonable expectations. They don't want to pay fees. The EV owners, oh, we pay higher registration fees. Well, you know what you should pay? A fee on your charging, just like fuel, and make it equivalent. That'll fill that, all the chargers. That'll help fill the bucket a little bit on transportation funding.
Wouldn't they already be paying taxes on those specific power fees, PGE fees? I mean, but it's just not getting allocated to, because the power company doesn't delineate the difference between you turning your lights on and you charging your electric vehicle in your car. So they don't.
I'm specifically thinking about like the charging stations, not at home. You wouldn't be able to tell. I don't want more smart meters, but if you're charging at a station, you might as well treat it like it's a gas station and charge a tax on top of your whatever fee you're being charged to levy that.
That, or if you buy an electric vehicle, then you can do the mile thing, track all the EV drivers around the state of Oregon all day long, and just know when you buy that Tesla, you sign a form that says that the state is going to track your crap and you're going to pay. And the rest of us, we already pay gas taxes, so we don't have to do the mile thing. What they want to do is they want to put the mile thing on everybody. So then us gas guzzling, diesel driving pickup drivers over in rural Oregon and now in Lynn County with my friend Reagan's new purchase, now we're paying on top of all of that. So we get to pay the gas tax and get to pay a mileage tax, which just isn't fair. Again, to your whole point of let's not toll the bike riders, because what they're doing is good for the country. It's good for the earth. So they want to use that as an agenda to drive their agenda. And then they say, I mean, even in this article, like what they say here in our rule settings, right? So they say during extreme weather events like snowplows can't run at night, impacting school bus schedules. And during wildfire season, it can mean the state doesn't have the staff to open and close freeways. Like, you know what? If you have an extreme weather event that the governor declares a state of emergency, that means you drop your stupid stop sign and you get in a truck and you go help close and open the freeways when you work for ODOT. You don't need another person that's hired that they're sitting on their ass doing nothing. And then they got to go close and open a freeway only in the summertime. Like, what are those crews doing? Maybe they can stop paving for a little bit and go help a wildfire that's happening, that's destroying I-84. Like, this stuff happened before. Like, we had wildfires before Reagan. And guess what? We actually had snow before. And this stuff happened before we had all of this big budget. And guess what? Those buses still actually got kids to school. Surprisingly, we figured it out in rural Oregon. And I would go back to, again, why don't you just give it to the county and get the hell out of the way then? Give them the money, that whatever money you have, give it to them and we'll figure it out. You know, like, we'll figure out how to make sure our buses that are on snow routes now, because remember that, Reagan? I don't know. You probably remember that. They used to have buses on snow routes. They would take two different routes, one for when it was snowing and one for when it wasn't, because they couldn't go down roads that wouldn't what? They wouldn't get plowed. So it's like, we know how to do things, you know, in the areas where we get snow. We're not babies out here. Like, just stop with I just hate the threats, man. The threats are just, it's annoying as all get out. And it's all threatening to the point. And you guess who doesn't have extreme weather events? Portland and Eugene. It's mild. They don't have them, you know, and that's the part that, to your whole point earlier, like, these guys are like, oh, well, nothing changes in Portland to Eugene. That's all going to be fine because we're going to make sure we take care of our people first, you know, and the rest of you go suck off. You know, and I think that's the part that just really upsets me about this whole transportation conversation. And then and the last thing on just this article, before we even pivot with some more transportation stuff I want to talk about, is I just get upset about this nuance of this agency. And you touched on it a little bit. In 2017, we spent more money, the largest tax increase in state history, I think, up until that point, probably before the Student Success Act was enacted. But I think the largest tax increase came in, all these incredible projects, like we're gonna have the best grid in the country and blah, blah, blah. They have failed so miserably at those projects, to the point of where why isn't somebody standing up and saying, can I get a list of all the projects that aren't done from 2017? And if they are, which ones got done that have failed because now they're smaller in scope than when you said you were going to do, because now you don't have the budget. You talked about the Rose Quarter. They have no money left to pay for that damn project. That thing ballooned, you know, to an 18th degree of that whole area. And I think it's because they didn't really want to start it. I think they really didn't want to do it. I think it was like almost like this, I don't know, smoking technique to get us to approve all of this new money that's now gone.
Yeah. And it was the truckers, especially, that go through that Rose Quarter area, who need those lanes to be clearer, because when a truck sits in traffic, an 18-wheeler that's hauling stuff, that costs those businesses money, right? And it's worse for the environment. So if that area could be cleared up, I mean, you know, that area going up into Portland, especially, you know, in the afternoons, it's just horrendous. I mean, it takes you an extra hour to get to Vancouver, basically. And even going the other direction, it just gets all jammed up. Same thing with 205, same thing with all these areas. But I think you're totally right. I think that was a give, that a project they actually didn't want to do. They gave it so they could get the votes, and then they just decided, we're not going to do the project. And frankly, that's offensive. I think that people should be fired for that, if any of them are still there, because that's not the Oregon way. That's not the way we're supposed to do things. We're supposed to be able to rely on people's words, and people should be able to keep their words and actually follow the law. I mean, this project was in the bills that was passed, which means it's part of the law, and we should be following the law. And if there was a legitimate problem or an expectation there was going to be a problem, it should have come up way sooner than 2024 for a 2017 transportation package.
So, Reagan, the other thing to transition just on transportation, the last thing I want to touch on, and we got some other things and that we want to get to, but I was listening to a podcast and I forget the name. I should have wrote it down because I hate to reference another friendly podcaster but they had the co-chairs of transportation on, which is in the House. That's McLean, Representative McLean out of Cornelius area, Hillsborough, and Senator Gorsuch out of Gresham. And McLean, and I was in there listening and just kind of listening to what they had to talk about. Well, she starts talking about revenue, like how do we pay for this? Well, she brings up what she really likes is a new bill out of Minnesota that will this passed and it went into effect July 1st. So it's a 50-cent fee will apply to all delivery purchases of $100 or more. So if you order Uber Eats or anything, and it's more than, they started with all deliveries of 50 cents or more, but they had to, I think, to get some other people on board, they added the $100 minimum. And then so any Amazon package you order, anything that comes in via a delivery, you're paying a fee on. So I think what happens is they said, well, this is all going to go towards maintenance. So they found another revenue, but it's not a revenue that Amazon's paying. It literally will show up on your bill, service fee, 50 cents for a delivery. So it's literally a direct pass on to the consumer, which is you and me. For every time we buy something from Amazon, anything that we get delivered, wine that you order from, your wine that's coming in on your monthly thing from the great wineries trying to make it happen. So now it's 50 cents more every time. And then of course, they tried to exclude, we took out, I don't know what it was. It was like some of the medical things, right? We pulled that out in baby products. Like, I don't even know how you delineate. So what if I buy diapers from Amazon and then I throw on some office paper? Do I pay 50 cents or not?
Well, so Brian, here's I went to the state of Minnesota Department of Revenue website, which is a very nice looking website. I'm going to send you this link. Has all the details about this fee. Yeah. And I actually had no idea this was a thing, so I'm just learning about it now. And so here's how it goes. You to calculate the $100 threshold, it's a transaction that meets or exceeds $100. All charges that are part of the sale price, not including the retail delivery fee. So if they like you said, Uber Eats, if their fees that are tacked on there makes it go over $100, then it's applicable to the 50-cent fee. So here is the things that are not that are excluded: drugs, medical devices, accessories, and supplies. Oh, food ingredients or prepared food or food. So maybe Uber Eats is exempt. Certain baby products, and this is hilarious. There's a list of which ones subject to the sales tax.
Yeah,
breast pumps and bottles, yes. Baby swings and baby wipes and bottle sterilizers breast pumps are not subject to sales tax. Baby swings and baby wipes are. Car seats, yes. And I'm looking at this list, and basically they exempted breast pumps because they thought that would be negative. And then everything else, like strollers and car seats, which are the expensive things that you have to buy, they're like, nope, we're definitely going to charge a tax on that because those are going to be over $100 in a lot of cases. Here's what I will do, Brian, if this were ever a thing. Sometimes my wife and I, usually what we'll do is we'll add things over the week to the Amazon cart and then we'll buy it. I'm just going to start making those individual purchases, which is actually, I would do that to keep it under $100. And that's going to create literally more waste than it is for me to put them all together in one sale, and they're going to lose more. Great, congratulations! You charged a 50-cent fee. You got us there. We're just going to ruin the climate more by ordering stuff in 50 different transactions instead of one big box. That's what's going to happen here.
At least
they don't think these things through.
We might be adding to the gas tax.
There they go. That's the trip. This is going to increase the gas tax by 10%.
Yeah. Well, they probably Amazon will be out of Vancouver, and so they won't even they won't matter because they'll be in Washington. And they'll say, "Oh, well, we're in Washington. We don't have to pay that." So who knows? There's so many problems, I think, with the coming up with new fees and everything when they're not even looking at reductions first. And when they look at reductions, They always look at like service reductions, not like you said, middle management, cut the fat, where can we find trim? And guess what, folks? We're heading into a recession. I think we're already in, and I think
Bryan, I have a complaint. I have a complaint to lodge. A couple of weeks ago, you were bragging about how great Dutch Bros stock was doing. Last night at 10:48 p.m., their trading name is Bros, which is great. Honestly, you get 4 letters and they got Bros. That's impressive. Awesome. Bros is down 11.2% in overnight trading. So I start seeing these alerts and stuff like that. You know what's a bad sign, Bryan? When the stock market isn't open and stocks are tumbling 10+%. That's a bad sign.
It is. Lucky for me, I sold all my Dutch Bros when I brought that up on. So
I get zero heads up. Zero heads up. I can't believe it, Bryan. You hung me out to dry. That's it. You're fired as my investment coach. I'm done with you.
Reagan, you're under 30. You got to you. That's a buy and hold for you long term. I'm all about making money at this point. I'm coming up to retirement. I hear him. I think I hear Pelroy on the other end.
There he is.
Hey, what's going on, guys?
Hey, Jake. All right. So welcome to the program, Jake Pelroy. Listen, we have a lot of guests, and I've been working for a long time to get some of these guys on, these in-demand consultants. There's a few of them, and they're pretty busy about this time of year. Not Bryan and I. We're not in demand, but there are some in-demand consultants, and they're pretty busy. But we've got one of them on the line right now, Jake Pelroy. He lives in Lane County at an undisclosed, safe, location. The libs will egg his house if we tell them where he lives. Welcome to the program, Jake.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Jake, you're welcome. And we're jumping in here. We're going to do a quick rundown on ballot measures because the Secretary of State's office put out a list of the ballot measures. And then after I emailed them saying there was a problem with the list, they sent a correction. So we have the official numbers now for these ballot measures. So HJR 16, which was a constitutional amendment that creates an impeachment process for statewide elected officials. And you have to have a 2/3 vote of the House and the Senate to impeach. They have a process now. That's going to be ballot measure 115. SJR 34, which is a constitutional referral from the legislature to create an independent public service compensation commission that will determine salaries for a bunch of elected officials. It includes all the statewide. I think it includes DAs. It includes the legislature. And it's going to eliminate the legislature's ability to set their own pay. House Bill 2004, ranked voting. That's going to be measure 117. The one before I was talking about, measure 116. Measure 117, ranked voting. We'll be getting into that shortly as the campaign starts to heat up. And then there's IP 17 that people have been hearing about. It increases corporate minimum taxes and then redistributes the money to every Oregonian with a $750 check. It does a lot of other stuff too that's really negative, like it puts the state on the hook to reimburse individuals for any federal benefits they lose if that $750 pushes them out of getting any benefits from the federal government. And then there's IP 35, which is now measure 119, which is cannabis retailers and processors must remain neutral in communications to their employees from labor organizations. Good old Paul Holvey.
Isn't that the Salvaggio? Isn't that the Salvaggio measure?
Yeah, it's the Salvaggio Paul Holvey grudge match. They tried to pass the bill. Holvey said it may have some legal problems. They're going to roll with it on a ballot measure anyway. These will be fascinating. But again, we've got, measures 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. And Oregon does not, I don't think we have a mechanism to reset the numbers. So we're just going to keep going on these numbers, each year. And we have about, 4 or 5 measures every year. And so, when I'm old, we'll be in the 200s, basically.
When you're my age.
I didn't want to say that.
The 15 and 16 is pretty easy. I think there won't be a lot of opposition or pro on either one of those. I think Republicans have been pushing for an impeachment process for a while in the legislature. The Democrats capitulated, gave us this, pretty simple reason for it to go. It just makes sense. I thought the only note I'll say on this one is 2/3. I thought they might shoot for a 3/4, but going for a 2/3 is a pretty lower threshold than you see in some other states. So I think that's good for us to have. It's just got to have that check and balance. And I think as we get closer to balance in the legislature, the more that holds accountable to statewide elected officials. And I think we got to have that. So I'm glad to see that one on there. The independent commission is also another way for us to, punt another commission. Reagan and I just got done railing on commissions, but this is supposed to be an independent commission that comes up with what you pay elected officials. And I think that's probably good.
And the idea, Brian, on that one is it's not supposed to be, half Republicans, half Democrats, not political. It's supposed to be people who are HR professionals, headhunters, salary compensation experts, people that know what makes sense to pay people for certain jobs. It's not supposed to be political. It's supposed to take this pay out of the political realm. Because what happens is when Democrats are in control and they want to raise their salaries, Republicans bludgeon them in the elections for trying to raise their own salaries. Jake knows a little bit about that.
Yep.
He's done it. And I've done it. And then when Republicans were in control and wanted to raise their salaries, minority Democrats were shockingly opposed to it. So we know that the salaries need to go up in the legislature. They're paying poverty wages. We're seeing that the statewide elected official compensation has caused problems, not competitive, even with just neighboring states, red and blue. So we're, hopefully this will be a way that Oregonians feel that it won't get politicized as badly, and it'll really just be focused on what should a person in a certain position be making. So hopefully that, here we go. See, that's my problem. I wasn't in gallery view.
Yeah. Well, I think they want to keep arm's distance from this decision. They want someone else to say, hey, look, we need to be paid more, and we should follow the committee's recommendations here. This is a group of people that are giving us recommendations. We got to follow them. They don't actually want to do the vote, but the vote is, it will affect them if they vote to vote for their own pay increase, because they think that these state legislative guys make a ton of money. They think that they're the same as the most of the public believes they don't know how much they make.
Well, I agree with you. Jake, do you see because you've been in this fight a little bit before, but I don't think I've ever seen an independent commission vote to lower any of the legislator pays across states where they already have them. So, and I don't foresee that changing either. Do you?
No, I don't think it's going to get lower. I mean, they're going to look at other states and say, hey, look at us compared to all these other states. And there's going to be some comparisons to California and Washington. And then, they might put in something like, here's what Idaho does. Or they're going to be checking states that are the similar size for sure to see what they do. And then they're going to be doing comparisons like, well, they do benefits or they don't have staff. I mean, some legislative bodies don't actually have partisan staff.
Yeah, that's crazy. I think they should go look at, I think like Arizona, for instance, I'm just familiar there. Like their legislators get paid nothing but like a per diem when they're in session. And then if you don't live in Maricopa County, Or if you live in Maricopa County, which is I think is like 60% of their legislators, they get nothing on the per diem. So you get more if you live outside of Maricopa County because you got to travel. Hey, look at that. If you actually have to travel, your expenses are more. Maybe we should look at that. Hopefully they'll look at those things, but we'll see. It's probably a step in the right direction at the end of the day. And voters vote for what they perceive to be good government bills, and this is going to be in that same perception. So I would imagine it passes 62, 64% would be my.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good estimate, Brian. Ranked voting is as Brian said, or they call it ranked choice voting, RCV. I call it really confusing voting. I think that voters are not interested in making a lot of changes to our election systems right now. And one thing you'll notice, Brian, I want to point this out for everybody because I don't think it's getting enough attention. So Oregon ranked choice voting, OregonRCV.org is the pro side. And they are, pushing this. My guess is they've got Soros money backing them. But if you look at their coalition, it includes a total number of 0 legislators listed there, and no Congress people either who would be affected by this. No statewide elected officials who would be affected by this. Here's what I think. I think the Democrats are looking at ranked choice voting, and they're a little nervous because it messes with the system where they currently win. Now, I do not believe that means the system is going to be better for Republicans. Typically, the team with more money that is able to have more manpower to manipulate elections will do better under a ranked system. That's why I don't really like it. That's why I'm working on the campaign to oppose it, because I think it's bad. It's not only bad policy, it doesn't make sense why you would rank candidates. It's going to lead to more confusion, more ballots that have to be cast out because people weren't able to follow the instructions. The NAACP president of New York called it racist, basically, that it was worse for minorities who've spent all this time building Congressional Black Caucus, Congressional Hispanic Caucus, building minority power in elections in these areas, and then ranked choice voting wipes them out because now they have to figure out where they rank their candidate compared to all the other candidates in the races. And so it's kind of fascinating to see that being pushed. I think that's why you see the elected officials hesitant to jump on, because they're worried about how it affects their, minority constituencies, and they're right about that. So it'll be interesting to see as that campaign develops, but it's bad.
But Reagan, they voted to put it on the ballot. Like, where's Rayfield at? I mean, this was his baby from the get-go. They voted, the Democrats voted party line. Jay can probably correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was party line vote to put this thing on the ballot. So, and then now they won't sign on to it because they're probably starting to see there's some fallacies in this whole thing. The fact that people are even calling it racist.
Well, and Jake knows this, star voting is actually what we really want. Obviously, it's a more confusing version of ranked choice voting, and star voting is really actually what we've got to get. Unfortunately, star voting was voted down recently in Lane County. Jake, can you tell me a little bit about what happened there?
Well, actually, I think it was 2020. The star voting coalition. I think it's started in Lane County. They put it on to do countywide star voting, and it lost in Lane County by about 10%. They tried to get the city council of Eugene to refer it to voters. They didn't end up doing it. They went out and collected signatures for this May 2024 ballot, and I tell you what, there were star voting signs everywhere. Yet it got beat pretty significantly at the ballot box. I think it was like 20% beat down. I thought for sure it was going to pass. Looking over the countywide vote in 2020, some parts of Eugene were pretty strong, 60-70% in support of ranked choice voting. So I thought it was for sure going to go in, yet it went down pretty significantly in May.
Well, and the best part of this, the most fascinating part, maybe you were about to touch on before I interrupted you. the advocates for ranked choice voting ran a very heavy campaign against star voting, which was promoted as the upgraded version of ranked choice. So these two sets of voting reform folks hate each other. They seem to be in a blood feud about this, which I find super interesting.
The Bloods and the Crips.
Yeah, except for the Bloods and the Crips are more mainstream than these two versions. I don't think the public actually cares about this stuff. Like, I think it's like two niche groups fighting over how to make voting better when people just don't care about voting unless it's a presidential election. I think that's part of the problem is why make it more confusing and more to do, like, then just get them a little bit more interested, have people care about their government a little bit more rather than make it more, more steps involved to participate.
I agree. Jake, I think you hit it right on the head. I think this is legislators with way too much time and people with way too much time on their hands. Hey, let's figure out let's tinker with our voting system to make it more accessible for people. I mean, I even think public financing of elections is a better scenario than star ranked choice voting. I mean, I think that has more, engagement scenarios to it, to getting people voting, running for local offices and stuff, because versus this stuff. I mean, this ranked choice star voting stuff is just silly. And it's not going to make people vote more. It's going to make them more confused. And I think it's horrible. And I think we're going to regret it ever coming. So I'm hoping that Reagan and his coalition is more successful than their coalition in this effort. So we'll be talking a lot about ranked choice voting. I think we need to keep pushing against it and just saying there's no, and I think you hit the nail on the head there, Jake, when you said we got to figure out a way to get people more engaged in just freaking voting, let alone, confusing them with how they vote.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think, there's been a couple, I'm going to say this a little tongue in cheek, but there's been a couple recalls recently, and the voter turnout has increased during the recalls, whether they want to get rid of their politicians or not. I think that's a different question than who to vote for. Like maybe ranked choice voting, and one of the options is to recall them. That'd be nice.
It's like the third, or it's like the fourth candidate on the thing is like, or would you like to just get rid of them?
Yeah.
Fine, we'll support ranked choice voting, but one of the options has to be throw the bums out.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to move on. We've invited a spokesperson from the opposition campaign from IP17 to raise corporate taxes, but Governor Tina Kotek, who's opposed the measure, she spoke to Willamette Week. She hasn't agreed to come on the program yet. We hope she will, but she said in Willamette Week recently that this Measure 118, raise corporate taxes and then give everybody $750 check, will, quote, now here's my favorite thing about this. They opposed it. A lot of the Democrats, I'm being told, are going to come out and oppose this thing, not because it raises business taxes, not because it's a redistribution of wealth scheme that doesn't help anybody. No, they oppose it because, quote, it would punch a huge hole in the state budget. They're always looking out for, number one, their state budget, not taxpayers, sadly. Other people are going to have to do that. And I think there'll be a very strong and vigorous campaign against it. We had the no tax on sales campaign with Measure 97 a few years ago. No costly tax on sales is the campaign this year. And we're going to work to, talk with them and hear more from them. But Bryan, Tina put the Salem payroll tax in the ground and looked like she's going to put another one in the ground there. 2 for 2 here with the governor, one of our best anti-tax advocates. I mean, who knew?
I think it's pretty easy to say because the Democrats are right. I mean, it does blow a hole in the budgeting and the whole process, and by a nefarious, California group that's come up to Oregon and say, hey, we got this wacky idea. Let's go try it in Oregon. And we tend to find enough wacky people in Oregon and say, hey, that's great. Let's go do it. And I think at least some of the, I don't know, I don't want to say friendly Democrats, but I think wise Democrats are saying, well, wait a minute, we can't go down this is too crazy even for us. And I think but you got to get it out to the people and let them know, because these are one of those things where you dangle a $750 carrot in front of somebody who doesn't pay attention to anything, and they look on the ballot and they're not watching any news. They hear nothing. They get no mail. They come home one night and they see that and they go, shit, yeah, I want $750. Like, we have to somehow reach those people, because there's going to be a constituency, probably 35% that's probably all in on this, the DSA crowd of Portland. And they're all in on giving illegals and then the whole 9 yards, $750, homeless people, you name it. And then, so really you're probably only looking at a margin spending $20 million, $10 million. I don't know what our budget is to defeat it, but I mean, geez, I bet it still only fails 55-45. So you're not dealing with a lot of margin there.
I would like to see this one pass in Multnomah only, and then be all the rest of the state vote no. I think I would love that, just to give them, just to remind everybody that Portland is weird and wrong, and the rest of the state understands how to be normal. But it'll be interesting. I mean, I think Measure 97. I should have looked this up before, but I feel like, Jake, do you remember what the margin was in the Measure 97 race?
I think it was close to 20%. But the only two counties that had approved Measure 97 was Multnomah and Benton County.
That's right. 59% of the state voted no, 40% voted yes, and you are correct. Those are the two. So yeah, I guess Benton, Corvallis really tries hard to be Portland. They work at it a lot. They passed they passed a end the war in Gaza resolution. They're doing a lot of big work there, trying to be a little mini Portland. So
I wasn't aware.
You're right. Oh, yes, they're terrible. All right, and then this last one, the cannabis one, I frankly don't know how I will vote on this one at this moment. Maybe we'll invite on the advocates, and then if there's an opposition campaign too, we should have that, because this one I think is a real discussion where a lot of people will go, why is this on my ballot? And the answer is revenge. And then which is the most hilarious explanation. And then the other part of it is, they're like, why will this matter a lot? And as I said before, I might vote yes to unionize LaModa so that they go out of business, because the fastest way to put a company out of business is to unionize their workforce. You see it with the papers. They all unionized because of the cuts, and then more cuts followed. And all these papers are getting sold and stuff like that. So, I mean, that could be interesting. But overall, I think just a weird measure to have on Oregon's ballot. One of those fun little quirky things.
I'll let Jake take this one first.
Well, I find it funny. Your reasonings aren't real. I mean, they're like, how do I get rid of these businesses the quickest?
We don't need any more of them. There are more. It feels like there's more marijuana shops than there is customers. Their parking lots are always empty. Now, maybe they're going at different times of the day than when I drive by them.
11 a.m.
Right. Well, and I'm driving by in the morning, the evening, to and from work, all that stuff. And they are, they're a different crowd. They operate on different hours, 11 p.m., 11 a.m., right? All that stuff. It could be that, but there's too many of them. It's generally been detrimental policy for the state. It started us down this decriminalization of drugs. And ultimately, I just don't think even the marijuana Democrats play games with the marijuana tax revenue, taking it away from local governments. But there's just been so many problems with it. Yeah, let's unionize their workforce. Awesome. Let's do it. That'll be great.
I was probably pro legalization a lot more. But now, since it's been legalized, I'm against it now.
Yeah, I mean, ever since you stopped using marijuana, you've been against it.
That's right. Yeah. Even though I grew up in Lane County, I've never smoked or used marijuana. So it's been a shock to everyone that
Disclaimer.
I've ever talked to. Yeah. But I think, it'll drive prices up for sure if you start unionizing these things, but that'll probably lead to more black market. I mean, I know that there was a problem with black market um, hemp down in Southern Oregon, black market marijuana. So I think that there's definitely another opening for that, and that'll just require more law enforcement to go and enforce that. So it'll be interesting. I mean, I don't know.
Is I don't know where, I guess I was kind of in the I don't care column when it came to legalizing marijuana, to be honest with you. I think now I just see it as a tax revenue opportunity versus the black market side of it. In regards to like the local municipalities, with Prineville, we don't have any marijuana shops here. We outlaw it. Most of the smaller communities, or some of them, it's kind of interesting when I go on the coast, there's marijuana shops everywhere, and there's small rural communities. So it is interesting to see where people are at on it. I think the unionization, this is really just a push by UFCW, right? That didn't get their way in the legislature to really try to flex their muscle and say, we don't give a crap what you guys say, Paul Hovey. Well, and if we can't recall you, then we're going to put it on the ballot. I think it was really just them not wanting to lose at the end of the day and have egg on their face, because that's really what they had after Hovey just destroyed them on the recall. I mean, destroyed them 90-10. And I think that they had to keep pushing forward. Otherwise, what do? If you're the lobbyist for them and you're the group that put all this money in the recall, if you don't get a victory here, an ultimate victory, man, the rest of your rank and file is going to be like, these guys suck. What are they thinking? And so it's a dumb ballot measure. I hope it fails, just by the simple fact of we don't need ballot measures trying to unionize every Tom, Dick, and Harry in any tiny little industry, i.e. medical interpreters, i.e. the other things that we're seeing pushed through the legislature. The three of us see that stuff all the time. And it's really these smaller unions going after any sort of pocket of employees and unionizing them. Pretty soon we're going to see ski lift operators unionized. I mean, what's next, right?
So you do not want to be a co-petitioner on my ballot measure to unionize podcast hosts. Is that what I'm hearing, Brian?
No.
Okay. All right. Scratch that one off the list. All right.
Kind of funny.
Okay. Well, listen, there's a lot of states that are better than Oregon. We know this. One state that's not better than Oregon, Washington. Washington sucks, but we're going to talk about their third district primary, because there's a very important part of Washington to us, Vancouver. It is a suburb of Portland. And anytime I say that on the internet, people go insane. They get very mad, but it's true. And so Vancouver has a congressional district, their third congressional district, previously held in 2020 by Jamie Herrera Butler for about 6 terms, I think. And then she was defeated in the primary by more of a MAGA Trump-style Republican, Joe Kent. And he ended up losing to Marie Gluesenkamp Perez. And she is running for re-election. She's trying to win re-election in kind of a swingy district. Brian, do you want to kind of, you brought this to us. You have maybe some insight into Washington politics that I don't have. And while you're doing that, I'm going to look up what the partisan lean of this district is.
Well, what I like about this one is it's closer. I mean, it was closer in vote total last time than even Lori Chavez Dreamer race in CD5 in Oregon. So it is a super, super close race. I would think between this one and the LCD race, from the Democrat side of defending MGP to us defending LCD. I love the acronyms for all these ladies now with their 3 names. I think that it's just a really good microcosm of what Republicans are trying to do to hold congressional seats. If you look at CD5 and how Lori reacts to news and her position on Trump and all of the things, to what MGP is doing over there in Southwest Washington while she's getting attacked. So she comes out and does it. She's like, well, I'm not ready to endorse Harris yet. Like, she's holding her powder dry, like all of the things. She's really making herself look like she's a moderate. All of the things. I gotta assume she in Washington, they have ranked choice voting on some weird level, but they have kind of an open primary and the top two move forward. So, which is different than us where we have closed primaries. But in the ballot, it says lean Republican, lean Democrat when they do things over there. So it is kind of interesting looking at the differences of how they do elections. This is tomorrow, so we're recording on August 5th. So we'll be able to report which top two move forward. There's a third Republican running against Joe Kent, or a third person, I would say, Lisa Llewellyn, who's a city councilor in Camas, and she's raised over 800 grand. Like, she's got some dollars in the bank. I think Kent's been clearly was on the Trump train. I mean, that's how he got Jamie Herrera Butler out of the race finally after winning 6 times in a row against somebody that always go up against her in the primary. So I just think watching this race, from how the Democrats defend something and Republicans attack, to how Republicans defend Lori Chavez DeRemer and how the Democrats attack, it's just going to be a really good juxtaposition over the course of the next 90 days or so that we have left in this campaign.
I also think, and then I'll let Jake, provide any insights. If you Google Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez and Lori Chavez DeRemer, they've introduced bipartisan forest legislation. They've introduced secure the border legislation together. They're basically, they got to DC and they're like, hey, we both have hard districts. Gluesenkamp-Perez's district, by the way, partisan voting index R+5, voted for Trump by 3 points. So it's one of a handful of Trump districts that Democrats hold. And Chavez DeRemer's in a Biden district. They both were just like, hey, let's have each other's backs. Let's work on the stuff that's going to be, politically beneficial to us. And I'm interested to see if that strategy works, or awkwardly, if it only works for one of them. One of them survives and one of them doesn't. I mean, it'll really be interesting to see like how that works out. I think also the benefit, depending on how the primary works out, if Joe Kent gets through, he's seen a little bit more as like the extreme Republican, but he also has more name ID, more money. Whereas Janelle Bynum was not viewed as the more extreme Democrat opponent. That was Jamie McLeod Skinner for Lori Chavez DeRemer. So Chavez DeRemer might have a stronger opponent than MGP, depending on how things work out. I mean, I don't know. Kent seemed like not as strong to me, but I didn't realize he was only like 3,000 votes last time, despite not having the world's best fundraising, stuff like that. So if he's corrected those issues with his campaign, he may win this time. Who knows? Anything to add, Jake?
Yeah, I'd like him just to like focus on his military experience. I mean, the guy has had he has a story with his wife being killed in action. He has his own military career. If you talk about those kinds of stuff, you should win that district. It's kind of when you bring in other noise, then you play right into this the incumbent's hand there with her doing a lot of bipartisan work. I mean, there's a handful of districts, I mean, relative congressional districts throughout the country that are actually swing districts because of the types of redistricting that has gone on over the last redistricting, where it's been really hard districts, hard to the right and hard to the left. There's a couple of districts out there that are really that close in our neck of the woods, where this is definitely one of them, and it could go either way. You would think that this year, Trump would get more. I guess maybe this presidential election changes all the time, but I would think that he would get more than he did in 2020. So it'd be even more that she would have to overcome. But, things change all the time.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think with that the MGP winning in 2022 turned out to not be a Republican year, right? So it slid to the left a little bit more, and I think that with the presidential election, what will really matter up there probably is turnout. I mean, that should probably, are the Democrats enthusiastically turning out for Harris? And we know that Republicans are there for Trump, with the enthusiasm hasn't waned at all on Trump. So we just got to maintain that enthusiasm gap there. I do rematches tend to always favor, the winner. So I would give the edge to MGP. Plus, she'll have all the money she probably needs to defend her position. And I think you're right with Kent. I think he got a little too much into the weeds with all of the social constructs of things versus focusing on who he is. And MGP's campaign was very focused on who she was, how she was raised, her story, all the things that make her a likable candidate. And she looks great. I mean, her TV ads are really great. I mean, she pops off the screen really well. She does a really good job on TV, and it seems natural to her, whereas I think he doesn't. So if I was consulting on that race, Jake would probably be the same. We'd be doing lots of takes on TV to get that right natural kind of, you want that guy that's a combat veteran, but I also want him to be approachable. I need him to be likable. I need him to sound like he belongs there, and that I can trust him, and that he's the guy next door. And he's got a bunch of tattoos on his arms and stuff, and he kind of shows them. I'd probably cover some of those up. I mean, it looks a little too rough for me from the stuff that I've seen him do. I just think he's still too rough around the edges. And my prediction now is, now if the vote were to take now, I think MGP will be ahead. But the tell is this primary, because in Washington, primary's over and it's a sprint to the finish. And that's always been well for Jamie Herrera Butler in years past, because she's always had like a primary opponent. So she spends a bunch of money in the primary, and then her name ID goes through the roof because she's spending a bunch of money in August. And then the Democrats aren't really doing anything. And then you don't have enough time to catch her. So I don't know if that's going to work in the favor here or not, but should be interesting.
All right. What else? We're starting to get a little long, Brian. What do you want to do to close this out?
Why don't you just transition us to, let's just talk. I want to talk real quick just about Cyrus Javidy's new opponent. Let's just bring him in. And then Jake, we just want to ask you about what's happening in Lane County. So we'll talk about Cyrus's a little bit. And then maybe you just give us an idea of what's happening kind of in your neck of the woods and some of those races that you're familiar with, if that is that what you're willing to do.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
House District 32, Logan Lady, as we noted, dropped out of the race. Democrats needed to pick a new candidate. All sorts of names were tossed out there, and Democrats settled on Andy Davis. He's a city councilor from the city of Astoria. He was born, according to his bio, Bloomington, Indiana, and moved to Oregon in 2015. It looks like he works as a research analyst for the Oregon Health Authority. Hopefully he didn't help craft the report on alcohol that has been super controversial. That would be a bummer for him if he had worked on that. That'd probably drag his campaign a little bit. So hopefully not. But sort of an interesting pick, not necessarily who I would have thought they would have picked. I thought, Brian, honestly, when you've got a Republican man, you really do want to pick a Democratic woman. That usually gives you a little extra advantage on the gender gap, typically, and someone who can really attack a little bit more credibly on women's health issues. So I'm a little surprised to see them go with a man.
Yes. Well, this might have been, from the reports I was reading, this might have been lack of choices. So sometimes when you're faced with nobody, you've got to choose somebody. So I would imagine this is probably where, and this guy looks like a good Democrat soldier. obviously working for the Democrat agency known as OHA. Hopefully he did work on the research reports that they
No,
could
oh,
publish.
sorry. That's right. I'm sorry. Yes, I forgot my Republican campaign hat. Hold on, I'm putting it
Yeah,
back on.
yeah.
Yes,
Maybe he
hopefully
did
he
the
did work.
research report on allowing, making sure that illegals get the right to register to vote, with OHA as they're getting their free health care. So hopefully he's worked on that. Hopefully there's some things that we can exploit with him. He does come from the tough side of the district for Rappajavity, which is up in Astoria. I think that's an area that, has been historically blue for this portion of the district. So he'll probably have a strong base up there, but I think Javity's done a pretty good job of working the district. It's a tough district to work just because it's got, from Tillamook up to Astoria, it's just got a bunch of little communities all throughout the district. So, and each of those communities are very distinct and have their own little issues, local issues, but they're all very distinct in nature. So you have to do a lot of town halls and do a lot of groundwork in these sort of districts. But I think Rep. Javity's done a pretty good job of being moderating where he needs to moderate and being conservative where he needs to be conservative. So I think he's done a pretty good job of walking that line, which is tough to do in the Northwest coastal areas up there because it was a solid blue area that has really kind of moved to the right because of social issues. And I think that the blue collar workers up there that have become, our strong conservative base should hopefully pull them over.
Yeah, yeah, good points, Brian. I think also there's that environmentals wing of the Democratic Party that has moved those coastal districts more in the Republican camp. But I know how hard recruiting is. You can look up and down the coast, and both sides have had problems recruiting candidates for some of the House districts along the coast. House District 9, the Democrat pulled out in the previous year. There was no one filed, so they had to run as a write-in. And then House District 10 this year with Gomberg, he doesn't have a Republican opponent. Then you go up to that northern seat, and you had a Democrat, and then they pulled out, and then they got a new person in. It's tough. I mean, I think chances are with Javity, and then if you win, you don't make a ton of money, and you have to drive to Salem all the time. So I think all those factor into who they got.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because you're right. Because even the Democrats, I heard they ended up fielding a candidate against Senator Anderson on the coast as well, but she was a last day file for them. So there's probably something the Democrats probably have a hard time recruiting in these swingier districts that are further away because the travel time. Maybe us Republicans are just used to traveling long distances, so it doesn't seem like a big deal for us to hop in our RV and go camp in Salem for 6 months.
That's true, and you got to look at the bench too from in these rural areas. The county commissioners have all moved more conservative, so along the coast. So you got less of a bench to pull from of people that are obvious for these legislative seats.
Very true, Jake. Well, to wrap it up, as Brian mentioned, we want to know what's going on in Lane County down there. I'm sorry, Lane County. It's an N, I think. So if you could walk us through sort of what you see as kind of like the key, maybe one or two key races or political issues that are really lighting voters' hairs on fire this fall.
Well, there was a pretty big thing that happened last Tuesday. 3 city councilors from Cottage Grove got recalled. There was a lot of residents that were upset about the homeless issue in Cottage Grove, and it all kind of came back to House Bill 3115, where they needed to come up, the cities needed to come up with a policy around public camping or create a location for a public managed camp. And the city council went with a managed camp, and a lot of the residents didn't like the outcome of that. It was set up right next to the post office, and the homeless population had grown significantly, and the city council seemed to not care about it. And so they recalled 3 of their counselors, and another chunk of them are up for election here in November. So we'll see how that turns out. I think there's a lot of angst around the homeless issue, and just is the lack of order that comes from it. People sleeping in random places, and drugs, and random occurrences that are on the streets. You can tell in our cities up and down the I-5 corridor that there's definitely a lot of angst about that, even in Portland. But as far as any of the legislate, there's probably one legislative race that's only in Lane County that's of interest. It would be that HD 7 in Springfield. You have John Lively, who's been in the Springfield district for he was elected first in 2012. And it was a hotly contested race in 2012. And that district has moved more to the right over the course of 12 years. Springfield is a working class community, and as the Democratic Party has moved further to the left, there's definitely been a shift there. And the Republican candidate, his name's Cory Burkett, it seemed to be gaining some traction in Springfield. The 2022 race between Lively and his Republican opponent, Alan Stout, was only about 1,200 votes separating them. And now Alan Stout's going to be on the city council in Springfield. So that's definitely one to look at. I don't know of any ballot measures. There was people collecting. This was an interesting one that I saw in downtown Eugene. They were collecting signatures whether to allow people the option to do a smart meter or not, because the local utility was forcing smart meters on people and saying we're going to cut off your power if you don't allow us to install this smart meter. And I actually saw one of my neighbors got his electricity cut off for a period of time. And he always had very left-wing signs out in his front yard, which I thought was rather interesting. So that might be an interesting ballot measure should it ever come up. I think there's a lot of angst on both sides as far as with the smart meters.
Fascinating. And is control of your county commission down there in Lane County up in this cycle? I know it's sort of, you got kind of a lean Republican commission, because even though Eugene dominates, Lane County is actually divided into districts. So you guys run your commissioners on districts. So it's actually very, typically very competitive.
Yeah. So for the county commission, they're done. Both Pat Farr, who's the North Eugene County commissioner, and Lori Trieger, who's the South Eugene County commissioner, they both won in the primary election. So if either candidate gets more than 50% of the vote, then they're the only name on the ballot in November. So most of our elections for county commissioners are in May, unless there's multiple people that are have filed. That's usually the occurrence. we do have a couple of charter amendments that will be on the ballot. Lane County is one of, I believe it's 8 home rule county, and they have a home rule charter. So that means that the charter is like a founding document for the county. It's the people's documents, like their constitution. It says like, how many commissioners there are, and how they're structured. And everything with the charter needs to have a public vote. And the charter review committee was set up last year, and they went over the charter, and they determined that they recommended to the Board of Commissioners 6 changes to the charter. The Board of Commissioners only approved 3 of those changes, and all 3 of the changes are pretty non-controversial stuff. It's stuff that has been in the charter that doesn't necessarily apply anymore because it never applied, or they've state law now governs what it spoke to. I think there's still some time for the county commissioners to put on more charter amendments. But, again, everything that's in the charter needs to go to a vote of the public. So there might be some more that'll go on for the November election. And then if the voters approve it, then it becomes a part of the charter.
Sort of like when we amend the Oregon Constitution, you can refer that out from the legislature, or you can collect signatures, but it has to be a vote of the people.
That's correct. Yeah.
Well, Jake, we appreciate you hopping on. Maybe we'll make this, a semi-regular segment. We'll do ride-alongs with Jake Pelroy and find out what's going on. We appreciate you coming in. You ended up pinch hitting for another guest, and we'll hope to have back. But we talked about, and Brian, I'm just going to say this in the podcast so I can put it in the title. One of the things, Jake, that you missed when we were started earlier, we talked a lot about the trans agenda, and I know a lot about the trans agenda, specifically transportation, is what we talked about there. If there's another trans agenda, I'm not sure what that's about. The confusion there is understandable, I'm sure, but
there's confusion.
So that's what we talked about.
There is confusion. That's right, Brian.
All right. Well, thanks for listening, everybody, for Crosstabs. You can visit us on your favorite podcast platform. Make sure to subscribe and then rate and or review us, especially on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And Jake, what do they do for the Google phones? I don't even know where you get podcasts.
Spotify, I think YouTube Music has podcasts as well.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And you can also follow Brian Iverson. He's at Brian G. Iverson. I'm at Reagan Canope. Jake, you're not on Twitter very much, and I think your account is locked, so you're not very fun to follow. But that's okay. People can send you smoke signals. They can try to figure out which house is yours. Driving around Lane County, maybe, I don't know.
The carrier pigeons find me.
Okay. Carrier pigeons. I love it. And you can also follow at Crosstabs FM. Visit crosstabs.studio to subscribe for email updates on the podcast. Any last words? Close us out, Brian.
No, I think you've done plenty to close us out, Reagan. I'll just thank Jake for coming on board, talking about Lane County. We might need to send them up to Brownsville to go fix that solution up there in Lynn County with their recall effort or whatever they're going to end up with in that city council. What a mess these city councils are.
Jake shows up to chew bubble gum and take names, and he is all out of bubble gum, everybody.
Funny.
All right. See you later.
Thanks, Jake.